Hey everyone, welcome back to Fish Den 365. I'm Den Haring, and welcome back to Topwater Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about a rather unusual bait. Take a look at that guy.
That's what I'm talking about.
So this is the Bill Lewis Stutterstep 4.0 topwater lure. Now, Bill Lewis is famous for making probably the most best-known lipless crankbait of all time, called the rattle trap, the Bill Lewis rattle trap. And over the years, the Bill Lewis company has made some significant contributions with other baits. And one of the baits that they came out with some time ago was the Stutterstep, which was a 5-inch, I think it was 5.0. Much more bulkier bait than this one. It was an inch longer, but much bulkier around. This is the Stutterstep 4.0, and it is a very interesting lure. Let's talk about this thing a little bit. I had some experience with this year. First time I used this bait was this year. I bought it this year and used it this year after watching some videos on it. And there's some pros and cons about the bait in my mind, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about the bait if you have experience fishing this. So please comment if you do. So first thing I noticed when I threw this bait out and started working the bait, there's no bait that I've ever come across, no topwater walk the dog bait that's easier to walk than this bait. The slightest twitch of the rod makes the bait go from one side completely to the other side. Hardly takes any work at all to make this thing walk. So that's a pro. And one of the things that you can do with this bait that I really liked was, you can use a very slight rod twitch to make the bait go this way. You twitch it again and it goes this way, but it hardly moves forward at all. It stays almost in place. You can keep this thing in one little, let's say like a 1 foot diameter of space for a long time and still yet be working it completely side to side like this. It's crazy. And it's just because of the way the bait is designed and how it's meant to go from side to side. So, this can come into play if you're fishing under a dock, or if you're throwing this bait around a large stump where you have a piece of cover and you're expecting a fish to be utilizing that piece of cover. You throw this thing near the cover and you can keep it in that strike zone where that fish is for a very long time and still work it and basically drive the fish crazy until it comes up and it decides to either eat the bait or leave it alone or vacate the area or whatever. So the bait has a definite pro in that you can fish it that way. And also, it also is very easy to just walk the dog, a standard walk the dog back to you. It's a very loud bait. And it doesn't sound as loud this way as it does actually when you fish it. And that's because the way the weights are and rattles are in this bait is every time the bait turns. Hear that? Well, you can hear that a long way off. Every time you just make that slightest twitch, those balls are moving around in there and you can just hear them rattling around. And so it's a very loud bait. And that could come into play when you have certain circumstances on the water. And I was using this bait at Lake Wallenpaupack in June, night fishing for stripers. And there was a bit of a chop on the water that night. And I was having a hard time getting the fish to track my standard fare, because usually I'll throw baits, topwater baits that walk the dog but are silent. And I decided to use this one, and it wasn't long before I had a good blow up on it. I had a couple blow ups on the back of it where they kind of missed it, and then I had one that took it really good, fought pretty good, and then just pulled off. So, and that leads me to talk about one of the cons of the bait. I don't like how the hooks are placed on this bait, but I don't have a solution for how it could be better. So this hook is okay being here, but this one, you got a tail that interferes with it, and then part of the belly interferes with it as well. So I just don't get the feeling that the fish could always get a good mouthful of hook on the back. Even on the front, you have this belly that could prevent that from happening. Now, one solution to that may be adding a second split ring, because you have a split ring that connects the hook to the little eye bolt on the bait where you connect the hook. Well, if you put a split ring on there and then put a second split ring on the existing split ring and then put the hook on there, the hook would hang down further. And it would be just as free swinging, maybe even more so. And so you might get some more bites that you might be able to convert a few more bites to fish in the boat that way. Because I tend to feel that you could lose some fish on this lure because of the way it's configured with those hooks. That's the one con that I have about the bait. The other pro about this bait is you can fish it a couple of different ways. We already talked about being able to twitch it in place, walk the dog with it. Another way is to throw it out there and let the ripples subside, hold your rod at about 10 o'clock and just start reeling steady. And this thing will just kind of wobble its way in. It'll wake, it'll make a wake, but it also moves and has a bit of a wobble to it as you retrieve it that way. And that could be another way. Certain days they might like that look better than that twitching, walking the dog type bait, retrieve. So another pro to that to add on that side. There could be a pro and a con with the rattles, right? At times I think these rattles can work in your favor. I think there's times when they won't work in your favor as well, and that's just dependent on, you have to experiment that each time you're out there to see, because some days, even when the water's dead still, they want something that makes noise, it pisses them off, or however you want to think about it. But then there's other days where if a bait is making a lot of noise, they just seem to avoid it entirely, and then you throw one out that it makes no noise or very little noise, and you tend to get a lot more strikes on it. So every day is its own day that way, and you just have to kind of experiment to find what's going on with that particular factor. The other thing that is different about this lure is it's got a very odd shape, but from underneath, when this thing is working side to side, it has a pretty darn good baitfish profile. If you turn this side to side, you can see that I like that wider body, right? Because shad and bluegills, they have that wider body from top to bottom. I mean, not shoulder to shoulder, but from top to bottom. And when you have this thing working, you got that wide body view, and it looks like a shad or an alewife. And so I like that. I think that can be a benefit. It's got this pogo type tail. That's a little bit different. But if you're working this bait, if you're walking the dog with this or just trying to make it work on the surface, I don't know if the fish really notice that kind of thing. So, and for the little time I used it, I did get some good strikes on the bait. So I'll be using it again in the future, especially next spring again when that striper bite comes around and that night bite is on. But I'd also like to experiment for smallmouths and largemouths with it as well and see how it produces there. So that's the Bill Lewis Stutterstep 4.0. I fish this with my topwater rod, and I've mentioned this rod before. I have 3 of them. One of them's right here. It's got a Sammy ready to go on it. This is an older rod. I don't think it's made anymore. It's a Daiwa Light and Tough series, and it's meant for topwater twitching. It's a topwater twitching rod, and it's set up very well to do that. The tip is just right, and the rod, the action of the rod is just right for that. I also use this for throwing jerk baits. It's a great rod for jerk baits as well. If you can find one of these rods, it's a great rod for those kind of techniques. I have 3 of them, and luckily I was able to get them at a tackle store that had them for sale like 3 years in a row, and in their March sale, and they're basically just trying to get rid of their overstock. Nobody seemed to want them anymore, and I really like the way they work. I also use them for blade baits. They seem to fish a blade bait and a spoon very well. So I have 3 of them, and I'd like to get a few more if they became available. All right, so that's the rod. Again, I like to use braided line on these reels. 6.8 to 1 is a good gear ratio. 7.3 to 1, another one that would be fine for throwing a topwater like this. The way this twitches, you want to have a slower retrieve, because, like I said, you can make this bait stay in one area for a long time that way, and not really have the bait come toward you very much. And I always use, when I use braided line on these bait casting setups, I'll always use a monofilament leader when I'm fishing topwater, because monofilament floats and it's a little stiffer, especially if you go up a little bit on the pound test. Like 17-pound test is perfect for this. That way you're not getting tangled on the front hook or anything like that. Where if you did use straight braid, that kind of thing can happen more, because that braid is very soft, it's very flexible, and it could loop around and catch onto the front hooks, and then you mess up your retrieve. So 17-pound test mono leader, a rod length or two depending on the clarity of the water. The clearer the water, the longer the leader, and you're ready to go. Bait cast of your choice, like I said, 6.3, 6.8, 7.3 to 1 gear ratio, you're good to go. Hope you got something out of the video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button. I'd also appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and share this with your friends. That helps get me out there in front of more people, helps the YouTube algorithm, and gets me more views, and that's what I'm trying to do. I want to grow my channel. We're all about the art and science of fishing, especially bass fishing. We're certified bassified. Can't wait to get back on the water. I was out for an hour and a half. I think it was Friday last week, and it would have been 2 hours, but I was so excited to get out on the lake that I forgot to put the plug in the boat. First time that ever happened to me, and there was a guy at the dock, and I start my motor, and I look down, and there's all this water in the bottom of the boat, and I'm like, what the heck happened? And then I realized I forgot to put the plug in, and I couldn't even go back onto the launch because it was taken up by somebody. So I ended up beaching the boat, put my bilge pump on, and unfortunately I was able to reach over the back of the boat and put the plug in and got all the water out and got out there. But I was hoping to catch a striper, but it just didn't happen that night. So I'm looking forward to getting out again. When I do, I'll have some footage for you, I hope. And see how it goes. Be safe out there. Hope to see you on the water.